Hello and welcome to another edition of the Spare Time Podcast with me, Nigel.
Me, Ben.
It always challenges that one.
No,
I'm going to do this for this time because we've got some brand new spotlights and I'm not going to be able to see anything by the time we finish. So at
Could
least
be
you
the
can
glare off my head.
Yeah.
see my shiny forehead.
He polishes his. Sponsored by ADR Wear. We'd like to thank ADR Wear for supplying our attire here. And on this edition of the Spare Time Podcast, we have Jeff Richgels, who's the owner of the 11 Frame website about bowling and also an ex-PBA bowler. So welcome, Jeff.
Great to be here. I've watched several of your guys' podcasts and shared them to my page and a couple of pages that I administer.
Oh, that's good. That's much appreciated. It's good that the podcast is getting over the other side of the Atlantic. So you're in Wisconsin at the moment?
Yep. At home. This is just my home office where I do most of my writing, and I've been working at home for the last couple of months. I had some surgery on the left hand, so I'm one-handed. It's very hard to drive, and I've got some restrictions. Nothing major in the surgery, but keeps me home with my dog. So she's right behind me here. So if she starts making any noise, I apologize. She's snoozing now, so hopefully she'll stay that way.
Oh, that's good. We locked the cat out of the room, so we're not going to have any cats making a guest appearance. So you mentioned your hand. I mean, you had a problem with your hand back in, was it 1980, I think?
Yeah, 80. Well, boy, I my right hand, this is just a left hand surgery here, just from being old. The original injury in my right hand was in 1972, I believe it was. I broke it playing football in the backyard, and didn't go to the doctor it was a week to 10 days. And they wanted to talk about re-breaking it and all that. And instead I was kind of chicken, and they just ended up setting it. And it turns out that it never really healed right. And that was long before I was into, I hadn't even started bowling seriously yet. I was only, 9 or 10 years old. Long story short, once I became a serious bowler, that took its toll on it. And I ended up in 1989. I was on the PBA tour in 87 and 88, and it got so bad that I couldn't bowl at all, hardly. And I couldn't even write, which, since I had a journalism degree, that was kind of hard. So I ended up being referred up to the best hand surgeon in the entire world. His name was Ronald Linscheid at Mayo Clinic, which you might have heard of, in Rochester, Minnesota, the original Mayo where it all started. And he put me back together. He told me I'd never bowl competitively again, but I'd probably be able to maybe bowl, if it worked out great, recreationally as a league bowler. And I remember telling him, you just do your job and tell me what I have to do, and we'll see what happens. Don't put any limits on me. And as it turns out, there's a reason he's the best hand surgeon in the world. He put me back together, and I worked my tail off. When I started, the exercises I did over a table with my hand here were like 1 pound, a 1 pound sand weight, and I could barely get it to lift up like this. It was unbelievable. And but it took me a good year or so to really get back, and I could never get to the point where I could trust bowling more than 3 days or so, 4 days maybe. And I'd gotten a full-time job at the newspaper, one of the newspapers here in Madison, and was on my way to getting married, and things didn't work out. I mean, when I was on tour at my very best, I was never going to be a star. There was no way. At my very best, I might have gone back on tour and, won a title or 2 or 3 maybe. Who knows? But there is no way I was going to be, anywhere in the realm of top guys making tons of money, which the money was pretty good then. But that was the glory days of bowling. But I knew the tour taught me how good I wasn't. And then after I came back, I got to determine how good I was, but I know I wasn't good enough to be a superstar out there. And so there really wasn't a whole great incentive to go back out there. So I became a weekend warrior and won enough stuff to sit here today with some Hall of Fame stuff in my background and a PBA banner from my retirement, and couldn't be happier with my career as it turned out bowling wise, and had the joy of sending little press clippings when I'd win something to Dr. Linscheid over the years. It was really a joy to send those to him and go back up and say, yeah, you did a pretty good job. And he was obviously very, very happy to see what happened. He didn't expect that at all. So it was just a fortunate thing. I mean, it was a bad break, literally, what happened to me when I was a kid, but things turned out pretty good for me. If it hadn't happened, who knows? It doesn't mean that I would have ever got into bowling and been better on. Maybe what happened with my wrist made me better. We'll never know. And it's gotten so bad over the years that I'm just a recreational ceremonial bowler now. Haven't bowled any PBA 50 or anything for a couple of years. And I mean, this literally is as far back as I can bend it, and that's as far forward as I can bend it anymore. So I can't cup it. Couldn't two-hand if I wanted to. The ball falls right off my hands. So that's out of the question. But I wouldn't trade all the things I've done for anything.
Yeah, same happens to me, but there's nothing wrong with my wrist, so I have no excuse for it. Yeah, I stopped bowling about a year ago. I just lost it for some reason. Been bowling for like 35 years, but maybe
Ben, are you a two-hander, I hope? Are you a bowler?
Yeah.
You got to be a two-hander.
Literally, I've bowled probably 11 years now, since I was like 6 or 7. I went two-handed.
Maths is not that good.
Shut up, man. I went two-handed about 10 months ago, maybe a bit less. And from what it's looking like, I'm going to re-qualify for Team England, so it's looking good.
Fantastic. I'm telling you, if you're a parent and you have a kid, they're probably going to want a two-hand, but if they don't, make them do it. Forget the haters. It's the Fosbury flop of bowling. It's a biomechanically more efficient way to bowl. Gives you more power, more speed. Your thumb isn't involved. You don't have to worry about those injuries. And history is proving out what I've been saying for 10 years, that two-handers have less injuries if they have sound games and don't herk and jerk and all that. Then, I mean, you can go down the history of all the one-handed power players who flamed out on the tour due to injury, from, Robert Smith, and, Chris Barnes had back surgery, and, there's just one after the other of guys who were forced off the tour who were power players, because it's so much force on your whole body with that thumb in there, just increases the force. And when you're two-handed, if you're in balance and stuff, it's just so much less torque on your body. I believe that's my opinion. And we're seeing it. You don't hardly ever see the two-handed guys missing tournaments. So, anytime anyone, a parent or someone asks me, I said, man, teach your kid how to bowl two-handed. It's the better way to bowl, more advantageous way to bowl. And I think it'll give you more longevity. I hate bowling against two-handers because I can't compete with them at all. I mean, I can't really compete anymore anyway at age 62, but I watch in awe and envy. And now the coolest thing is, look at all the young girls who are coming up there. We had the U22 Masters and Queens, and the Danielle, and I'm sorry, her last name is escaping me now. I apologize. African-American gal who's at Jacksonville State under the O'Keefes. Wow, does she throw an unbelievable power and speed. And then last night I turned on Junior Gold U12, wanting to see the young gal that I wanted to watch the guys too, but I really wanted to see this young gal who's 12 years old. And she's a two-hander lefty. And I don't even know if she's 5 foot tall. I mean, she probably is a little bit over. Tiny little thing. And what a game. Solid at the line and power. And I mean, I was just in awe. And that's something I got to write here this afternoon after watching the show last night before I went to bed. I was just in awe. It's fun to watch. And I know there's all the two-handed haters out there, but you just have to give it up. It's past. That era's past. That we're not going back down the road. There's not going to be any rules changes. There aren't any rules against it. Just deal with it and enjoy watching what we're watching.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I just generally in life, I've been quite injury prone, and growing up, I played a lot of different sports and always used to find a way to get injured, and would come home and this was wrong and this was wrong. And especially like one-handed, I'm a big field player. I wouldn't say I'm very technical, and a lot of the issues I always had was, I've got this issue with my thumb, or I'm not getting out the ball quick enough because of my thumb, or this or that. And there's a lot sort of oriented around the issues that I had with my thumb. Whether that, I mean, I'm double jointed, whether that makes a difference or not, it's beyond me. And about a year and a half, 2 years ago now, sort of maybe sort of May time last year, I was out of bowling for nearly 2 months with nearly a stress fracture on my back from bowling one-handed. And then since I've bowled two-handed, the worst thing I've had some ripped skin, which is one of those things that happen because you're bowling in different ways. And I mean, I really haven't had too much of an issue, but I think the one thing that's always stuck with me is that someone said, what a one-hander can do in 4 years, a two-hander can do in one. And
yeah, I believe it.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, I went from literally September. I probably didn't start until October last year going two-handed, and I was like, you know what, we're going to give it a shot. Like me as a one-handed bowler, I was never anything special. I mean, wherever it was about 250, that's probably a generous amount as well. So it was tough, and then I went two-handed, and I'd say I've completely transformed how I've bowled. I've managed to start on my feet, luckily, and I'd argue that I'm a better bowler now than in 9 months, 10 months of being a two-hander than I was in 11 years of one.
Sure. And then your whole trick now is control. You've got the power because you're two-handed, and if you're doing it right and you have good technique, which I'm sure you do, and then it's just a matter of repetitions and gaining control. And, go back. If someone wants to really see a test case or a proving case, go look at Jason Belmonte when he was in the early 2000s and when he first came on tour, and watch how many moving parts there were in his game. And he wasn't always totally balanced at the line and that. And then watch him now. I mean, he literally, his game is so fluid, so smooth, so repetitive. He's so solid at the line. He never falls off. I mean, the travel to Australia is more damaging to his body, I think, than his game is to his body. And I think he could bowl till he's, his body literally broke down from old age, not from any bowling maladies. And I mean, he will retire because of the back and forth from Australia, as he said before. The game will push him away. And I mean, I just watching the way he's evolved, and that is just amazing. And there's so many. Once you watch the guys on tour that are two-handed and the solidness that they have at the line, and that's what separates. They repeat their shots and they're solid at the line and aren't like flailing all over to get the revs and that. So I mean, those are the guys to look to, and then find a coach that can help you reach that point. Somebody like Mark Baker, or I'm sure you have some in England.
Sort of. I mean, my coach, I'd argue to be one of the best in the country, but I'm fortunate enough that my coach coaches me, and that's it. So, so we're really not blessed when it comes to coaching. I mean, I'd say there's probably, like, if you're talking higher level coaches, I can't count on my hands how many there is. There's probably some that I'm not aware of, or some that coach that I don't know do. But I wouldn't say there's many at all. But you mentioned about the sort of the flack that two-handed players get, and sort of the negativity to it. And when I went two-handed, there was a little bit of negativity, but not too much. I mean, I was told, "Oh, it's the worst decision you'll make," or you can't do it, or just kind of like, you've bowled this way for so long, are you sure you want to do it, or not another two-hander. But at the end of the day, it's like, I'm gonna be honest, I look back now and go, I was never gonna win anything one-handed. Like, sure, I won stuff in England, but I mean, I bowled one or two things in Europe and maybe cashed or came close to it. But I then literally have bowled 2 European events within 5 months of me being two-handed, and bowled like way better than I'd have ever done one-handed. And I mean, my dad's probably the better one to speak about it, seeing the development from a third person. But I think as a two-hander, you can really, especially if you put effort in and you're dedicated, you can really change your game so quickly. Because
sure. And I know we're not here to do a two-handed thing, but the last thing I'd say is, if you just want to see the future, look at U.S. youth. I mean, that's what I get. I don't get to see the rest of the world. But if you look at Junior Gold and the PBA Junior National Championship, especially with the guys, you will not find hardly any traditional one-handed players competing at the highest level. There are a couple, there's a few, but almost, I think the last 2 years, the 10 finalists in the PBA junior for the guys, it was 9 out of 10 both years were two-handed. Junior gold this year, there were 6 champions, U12, U15, U18, and this includes the women, the girls. 5 out of the 6 were two-handers, and most of the two-handers at the highest part of the competition, and the guys, or most of the players, were two-handed. I mean, it's just, it is what it is. It's the Fosbury flop of bowling, and it's here to stay. And the tour, I would expect on the tour, PBA tour, in 10 years or so, that EJ Tackett will be he'll be a unicorn out there. There'll be a couple others, an AJ Johnson or something like that, but those guys will be the exception rather than the rule. And it wasn't too long ago that it was the opposite, where Belmo and Oscu were the unicorns, and that's only been 20 years since they hit the scene, and now it's flipping every day. Every year it's flipping more and more.
Ultimately, I think it comes down to skill. I mean, a lot of people go, "Oh yeah, but once everyone's two-handed, then there's not going to be an advantage being two-handed." But I think it's so similar to one-handed in the way of, yeah, everyone can do it, but how good can they do it?
Yeah, it's still a matter of, I believe me, I've seen plenty of crummy two-handed bowlers and beaten plenty of crummy two-handed bowlers. There's still a massive amount of work and skill and talent and practice to get to be the differentiator between a Belmo and a Kyle Troop and Anthony Simonson and your run-of-the-mill, league bowler two-hander.
I think it definitely comes on to rev rate as an important thing. And I had an argument, I wouldn't say an argument, but a debate with a coach a while ago, saying that you should teach your bowlers to like your younger kids who are like 6 and 7 should teach them to bowl two-handed. Bear in mind, both these coaches have won, and their argument was, yeah, but EJ can. I went, yeah, but EJ can, but not people else can. And
right.
I think, especially when you're younger, you mentioned it there, the young lads and lasses are doing so well two-handed because of the extra power that they can gain. And yeah, EJ can do it, and like you said, the will be.
Like I said, he's a unicorn. He's a freak of nature. He just has supernatural talent and just developed a game that's he's sort of the modern version of Pete Weber, who really small, 150 or less. I'm not sure exactly what EJ is, but tiny guy that to be able to generate that power is just unbelievable. And he's the exception that proves the rule, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I was listening to a podcast earlier that he was on, actually, and he said, I don't care how you do it, whether you put it between your legs, one hand, two hand, over your head. He says that at the end of the day, it comes down to making a shot. And I think you, as someone that's covered bowling and bowled on the PBA, knows that better than most. I think, how important would you say that being able to make that shot is compared to being able to rip the cover off of the ball and have that power to strike? But you yourself, you did 90 consecutive close frames when you bowled, I believe it was the US Championships.
Yep.
A while ago. So you better than most will know how important making a shot.
Well, I'll tell you, here's the way I look at it. When you go to the top level, the tour or team trials, a highest level of bowling, if you can't strike a lot, you're not going to win. But no matter how much you strike, if you're a terrible spare shooter, it will keep you from winning. So you have to do both. It's very similar to golf. Hit it a long ways for the most part and, get it on the green. But if you're a terrible putter, you're not going to be a star on the PGA Tour, no matter how good a ball striker you are. And if you have a terrible spare game, you will fail on the PBA Tour. But if you're the world's greatest spare shooter and you don't strike enough, you are not. I mean, EJ's breaking the record this year. I think for average, he's right at 230. That's high. I mean, that's a 5-bagger every game if you're clean. So you have to be able to strike. But yet there is no one out there that strikes enough consistently to be a superstar without being a great spare shooter. If you go look at the Lane Talk stats over the course of a season on all the top 10, 20 guys, you will see incredible spare shooting percentages. It might not be great as great as a Walter Ray was in his heyday or something like that, but it's going to be close, a lot of those guys. And especially even the two-handers, you'll see Belmo is a phenomenal spare shooter. What's one shot that I always remember about Belmo is the year that he won the US Open. What did he make on his fill ball to win of his 10th frame after he kind of gacked the second one in the 10th? It was a 3.6910. And he split it perfectly with his white plastic spare ball that he was throwing then. I think it was white, or maybe it was I think that was the white one still there. But anyways, this plastic spare ball, and he split that 3.6910 perfectly to win. And I think he just needed, if I recall, three to tie, needed the spare to win. Was that it? And he went for it, taking the chance. I mean, he could have played conservative and gone at the 6.910 if I'm recalling what that situation was. But I do know that he made that just absolutely perfectly with his spare ball. And I'll always remember that shot because we've all seen him strike a billion times, but he just showed you how great a bowler he is to make one of the toughest spares in the world on what I remember was the US Open pattern to do it. So that's a shot that says everything to me about Belmo, which people may shake their heads, but I bet you if he was on here with us, he would say the same thing, that he takes pride in that shot almost over anyone he's ever thrown.
Yeah, I mean, 90 consecutive clean frames is one hell of an achievement. And the nearest I've been to it is 90 consecutive open frames.
I almost did that. I almost did 10 this year in one game out there. I went 137, 300.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned a little bit earlier on about the glory days of bowling. So bowling is a sport that's changing. Obviously, we're talking about two-handed bowling, and that's an evolution of the sport. It's something that's come along, and it's here to stay. There's no doubt about it. So what in your opinion has changed now from what you refer to as the glory days of bowling to now? What is the difference, and what do you think that reason for that difference is?
Well, I just got done reading a fabulous book, a biography of Andy Varapapa by Professor Glenn Gerstner, who I've gotten to be friends with because he had emailed me about the book, and I got to read a couple selections of it. And it is, I'm telling you, you can get it through Amazon or whatever. It is worth every penny if you want to read about the history of bowling before the PBA, before the Great Team era. Most of this is 1900 to 1950 was his, the earliest years. I learned so much that I didn't know about then, and how big a deal bowling was then. I mean, he was a Hollywood superstar. He was as well known as any athlete, as Mickey Mantle or anyone in the whole country, as a couple of the other bowlers were. They made as much money as any of the other great athletes in that era. And part of the thing is that everybody, I mean, bowling, there weren't, our landscape culturally was so different then. There wasn't television until the 50s. Then when television came along, it was easiest to show bowling because the technology was so primitive that you just needed a camera or something in this bowling alley, whereas it was really hard to put cameras in baseball stadiums and football stadiums and be able to see the action that good. So bowling had an advantage from everything I've read in the early years of TV, and everyone bowled. I mean, your job place was, say, a union or a plant, a construction plant or whatever, and you went and bowled. That's what people did. There wasn't an internet, there wasn't television, there was just radio, and people, there wasn't much to do, basically. People bowled. That was one of the things. And a much higher slice of the population did, and newspapers covered it. It was just at the top. I mean, this is the days when boxing was a giant sport in the US, and horse racing. And then as things changed, the PBA was still big into the 60s and 70s and 80s, but the thing that we didn't have then is you can't get 50,000 people in to watch a bowling match. I mean, theoretically you could, and we've had arena finals with, I think, 7,000, but try watching 10 pins down in a little corner in the machine from way up in a stadium. It doesn't work. So we were never going to get that, and other sports came to dominate TV, and let's face it, bowling wasn't cool. reputation hurt that way. And then we had all the sociological things, that the cable TV and what our strength was, those TV ratings that we got on Saturday afternoon on ABC. And they were tremendous. I mean, there were shows that drew double-digit ratings. You know, I think the record was a 14 share, which now, I mean, is unheard of for anything but the biggest of the big sports. You know, an NBA Finals game that gets a 14 is doing great. You know, I think a couple shows back then had 10 million viewers. You know, now we're excited if we can get 1 million. Because everything's been splintered off, streaming, all the cable channel. You know, first it was all the cables channel, then it was the internet, then it was streaming, and there's just people just have 1 million things to do, and bowling's just this fun thing that you go and do. And back in the day, Andy Varapapa was looked to as the same way Mickey Mantle was, and you know how that ever kind of disappeared is, you know, the $64,000 question. Besides the sociological things, just the respect of that bowlers got for bowling just kind of went away. And, you know, there's 1 million theories on that, and I'm not sure we'll ever be able to understand exactly why that happened. But clearly, my opinion is that the way to recapture that is you need to use colored oil everywhere. And when I go and play golf, and when I used to go and play golf, I can see the sand traps and the water hazards, and I know the difference between Augusta National and Oakmont and St. Andrews, Royal Troon, and my local municipal course. I know what those guys are doing on the Pro Tour is totally different than what I'm doing if I go play my municipal. When I go to my local bowling alley, I can't see the oil. To me, what Jason Belmonte and Anthony Simonson and EJ Tackett are doing, to me, it looks exactly the same as what I'm doing. And when they shoot 180 in the US Open on a flat pattern or close to it, I don't understand why what they're doing is different than what I'm doing. And the PBA has used colored oil on the TV, but the problem with that is that your local center is not using colored oil. So I see this thing that's out there on the lanes for the PBA, and I don't have any context. What does the pattern look like when I go bowl league? Now, if it was out in my league and I could see, oh yeah, here's this just big funnel of oil down the middle and nothing on the last 10 boards, and then I see the PBA where it's pretty blended or flat across, I'd be like, okay, now I understand a little. That's what's missing for the average non-bowler, especially, to understand. All my media colleagues through the year, I would always ask them. They would say, you know, what's the difference? I'm bowling on the same, you know, it's bowling. What's the difference? And I would start talking about oil, and they'd be like, I can't see any oil. And you know, if it was sometimes we'd be somewhere and I could take them out and show them the oil in the lane from the other side or have them feel it, but still, you're still not really seeing it. Okay, then colored oils comes along. I could show them that. They go, but I don't understand what that is, because they didn't have the context of the house shot. The one thing I always wanted the PBA to do was always put a lane within viewing distance with a house shot on it, and then pan the camera over, say, here's what you bowl on in your league, basically. Here's what we're bowling on. Instead of just going, oh, here's what we're bowling on. That's great, but okay, how do I understand what that is versus when the guy down the street, my buddy down the street, is averaging 240 and has 10 300s this year. Isn't he as good as Belmonte? That's the mindset that colored oil allows us to overcome. That, to me, is the only way I think of that would allow us to get through that barrier for the non-bowler to understand how great Belmo, Simo, EJR, and on all the guys out there. Same for the women's tour or wherever we're at the high level. That's the only way to break that barrier and get people to start understanding. You know, Belmo's had the idea, he's a proponent of colored oil too, to use like they do in golf. They use colored tees. Okay, your league oil would be, you know, white, and Pro Tour oil would be black, you know, just like, and then there'd be a red for, you know, the kids conditioner, so whatever, just different colors. So it always signified the level of difficulty too. Another way to signal what you're bowling on.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask it sort of a very bowler's question here, but I mean, I've obviously watched PBA where you've had colored oil, but you know, if you're bowling on a TV show, you're only bowling maybe 4 games max on that oil pattern. Now, that's not going to actually change the look of the oil pattern much. But I'm just wondering if you know, like, say if you put down colored oil for a block event, maybe like a 6-game qualifier block event or something like that, can you actually see the way the pattern changes with the oil?
Oh yeah. In fact, if you go back, and there have been a lot of PBA shows where they'll do close-ups and you can see the guys tracing shot after shot after shot, and it creating a tunnel where the color has been displaced. So you can see it a little bit. Now, if you had an 8-game block at the US Open, say, and had the color out there in qualifying, you'd see this humongous hole blown open in that oil for sure, compared to 4 guys on a show bowling or 5 guys on a show bowling 4 games. So it would definitely make a difference where you would see it, but you can see it. And the other thing is, when you're there in person, like I've been at several tour shows where there's colored oil, and I've walked out to close to the foul line lane next to, and you can see the pattern. And on TV, the distance, sometimes the pattern looks a lot easier than it is because the shades go down lighter. But when you get out there and you're actually in person, you can see there's color all the way across the lane. It doesn't show up as good on TV. So the patterns look a lot flatter in person than they do out on TV. But you'll and especially if you go out after a show, and I've done this and gone and just looked at the way the pattern gets blown up, and you can really, it shows a lot more than you think it does. Even just because there's a lot of practice that goes on too. It's not just 4 games. It probably works out to more like 10 games with all the practice, the number of balls they get, and the whatever it is these days, 15 or 20 minutes beforehand.
I'm just wondering, do you think it makes it easier that you can kind of see the way the oil's broken down?
No, because and this is what's really funny, is that you'll often see the oil pattern and people won't play where you think they would play. Like you'll see a pattern and it's like this, and you say, oh, they're going to play right here along that line. But that line, the ball they're using is way stronger than that, and you can't see lane topography, and they'll be playing the shot. You'd say, oh, the shot's at 5 to 10 based on this pattern, and they'll be playing 20 with the super high rev rates and strong balls and whatever the topography tells you. So if you're using the colored oil as your guide, your ball is your guide. Just like if you have a pattern graph is just a basic thing to give you an idea of what's out there. Volume, shape. Volume is important. Distance is important. But you got to throw your ball, and you have to let your ball be your guide, because everything you think about that pattern could be completely wrong. And topography plays a huge part in that. But just also that it depends on the ball you're using and who you're with and all the rev rates and everything. So it's just a general thing to give you an idea. But boy, let your ball be your guide is the best piece of advice anybody ever gave in bowling.
I think for me, the first time I saw the colored oil, I thought it was a graphic on a TV or something. I didn't realize it was the actual oil. But yeah, it's great because obviously I'm a one-handed straight bowler. And to me, I don't.
You don't care.
You don't care.
You aren't affected then. If you're throwing it straight, you're not affected. So you're.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the oil was never a consideration for me, but just to see how it works was. Yeah, it certainly made the thing more interesting for me to watch. And, you what you said earlier, you come back to a subject that we touched on quite a bit in the SpareTime podcast about, what makes bowling not as popular as some sports. And as you say, you can fill a stadium with 50,000 for certain sports, but, you get 7,000 for bowling, and it's difficult to see the pins and things like that. And the conversation we've had a lot because a PBA are played in bowling centers, and bowling centers are not really designed for large numbers of spectators. So it's really difficult. I mean, we mentioned many times before that South Point, where Ben bowled a couple of years ago, that was a great example of somewhere that would cater for a lot of spectators. And I'm told that Reno would too, but the vast majority of bowling centers don't do that. And I think that is one of the main reasons. Well, not one of the main reasons, but one of the important reasons why bowling maybe isn't as popular as it could be, because you can't get that number of spectators into an event. And to do, to get a lot of spectators into an event, you've got to get a big hall or something like that and set up a special lane. And, the costs of that are expensive. And, we've often compared it with the likes of darts and said, well, you can get lots of people watching darts. But yeah, it's pretty easy to set a dartboard up on the stage, get some cameras, some lights, then fill it with tables and give people lots of beer. And it's a different sort of situation. So the very nature of bowling makes the whole thing more difficult.
Tough.
So
it's not like in golf courses, they can get thousands and thousands of people on a golf course too. PBA, it just doesn't work at a bowling alley. And it comes down to this: the PBA Tour is a TV sport. If you take without that TV contract for the advertising and the sponsors, the PBA doesn't exist. It's just a traveling pot game, because you can't, unless you charge everyone that comes in $10,000 a person, which obviously no one's going to pay. You just can't have enough money without it. Everything comes down to TV, which is part of the reason the women's tour originally went away. And thankfully now, if you're a female bowler, you have the USBC BPA subsidizing them for, $1.5 million a year, just so they can have a tour with some prize money and some TV and bowl TV. Without that subsidy, they wouldn't exist. And if, heaven forbid, the PBA suddenly couldn't get a TV contract, it would take Bolero, I guess, or somebody to put up an enormous amount of money to make any kind of tour at all. So we're a TV sport. That's why if you're a professional bowler and you're boring, you're your own worst enemy. And I'm not picking on anyone, because I know some people, that's just, they're introverted and that's their nature. But we're entertained, I shouldn't say we anymore. I'm obviously not part of that. Those people, those guys and gals, are entertainers. And if they aren't entertaining the people watching on TV and the people quit watching, that'll be probably the end of bowling, unless you have a fairy godmother, godfather, god company to throw vast amounts of money at them to keep the tour going, which for the women, that's what's happening.
Yeah, so bowling really as a game has got to evolve, and not necessarily the game itself, but the way it's set out in terms of spectators and making the thing more interesting. And another comparison we've made is with F1. Every year the rules in F1 change a little bit to try and keep the fans interested. And it causes controversy because there's things they do in F1 that people don't agree with, and they don't think should be happening. But it gets people talking about it, and it gets, it's not the same thing year after year after year. And maybe something like that needs to happen in bowling to start to take it to the next level, to get more interest and to get those better TV contracts, better levels of sponsorship, and that will maybe accelerate the game a lot compared to what it is now. And the fact is that bowling, the Olympics are on in Paris right now. Bowling isn't there, and a lot of people ask me, to know Ben bowls, and they say, well, why is bowling not in the Olympics? And I don't really know the answer to that one, but
I do. I've written a million stories about it. Kevin Dornberger was the world bowling president and the point man for bowling's Olympics efforts for years. He's retired now. Tokyo, bowling was this close to being a medal sport in Tokyo. Bowling's big in Japan. The Japanese local committee really wanted, baseball is like huge over there. Karate is huge over there. Those two were going to get in. And then there were 3 more sports, and bowling was the next one out after, what was it? It was surfing, rock climbing. The third one is escaping me right now. Apology. But it was another youth-oriented sport. And it's really simple. The IOC, you could look at the stories I've written. The IOC has told us many times, here's how it works. Advertisers want to reach youthful people. They don't want to reach me and you, Nigel. We already know, like, I drink Diet Dew. I drink the beer that I like. I have my car choice pretty much. We're set in our ways. We know what we want. And we're not really the target demographic for advertisers. They want Ben. Ben hasn't decided what he really is going to buy for cars or a million things. Young people, and they're also the trendsetters, young people are. So advertisers, for whatever, and you can argue that they're stupid, and there's obviously some products that go after us old folks, but they're not enough to really matter. advertisers. So you have sponsors and advertisers going after the youth market. And guess what? TV networks want sponsors and advertisers. They don't make money without sponsors and advertisers. So they want whatever the sponsors and advertisers want. Guess how the IOC makes all its money? TV networks. So what does the IOC want? International Olympic Committee. They want what the TV networks want. And so you have this cascade up the line. So the IOC wants youth-oriented sports. They've put out press releases of this after the sports were chosen for 2020 and 2024. They've kicked out weightlifting. They've kicked out boxing. I think it was pentathlon, might have been another one. And now we have breakdancing is in this year. You know what? Everyone laughs at that. Well, you know what? They had this breakdancing competition before the choices were made for 24. They had 90,000 spectators at a big breakdancing competition, high-level competition in Brazil. You can laugh all you want. If we had 90,000 young people at Junior Gold as fans, bowling could get in the Olympics because advertisers would flock to there. I mean, that's what we're lacking and you can argue forever about the reasons for that, but that's it. Why do you think it's surfing, it's rock climbing, it's break dancing, it's all these youth oriented sports, and esports is on the horizon. We now have esports, I believe, was accepted as, I guess, a demonstration for 2028 in Los Angeles. That's the next thing that's going to come because that's what kids do and that's what advertisers want. That's where the money goes to. So what do you think the IOC wants? They want what those advertisers and sponsors want. So that is the only reason we're not in the Olympics, or the main reason. All the people that want to tell you that it's lane conditions and left versus right and bowling ball, no, they don't. The IOC doesn't give a rat's patooey about all of that. They don't get involved in technical matters. Kevin Dornberger explained this to me once when I was making these arguments when he was first teaching me this stuff. He said the IOC lets the federations of each sport run the rules and all that. All the IOC cares about, don't have drug scandals, don't have cheating scandals, make sure your people follow the rules and it's clean so sponsors don't get mad because they don't want to be associated with negative stuff. So you keep it clean and all that, fine. But inner bowling arguments over stuff like lane conditions and that's nothing. The IOC will not care about that. They don't even know that you put oil on the lanes, most likely, from what Kevin said. They want to know how many fans are going to watch, how old are they going to be, how many sponsors do you got, how many advertisers do you got. That's what they want to know. The TV network's going to want you on. If you have all that, great. If youthful appeal, great. They don't lie about it. They put out press releases that said that when these sports were chosen. It's as plain as the dome on my head here that this is what it's all about. And I get so aggravated that people don't see what's going on, and we get bowlers arguing among themselves about lane conditions and stuff like that. That has nothing whatsoever to do about it. It's all about green. It's all about money, and money is TV money, sponsors, and advertisers.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, my sort of question would be, obviously you got people like Darren Tang, Parky, even Jason Belmonte, he has started it now, I believe. There's so many now, like, younger. I mean, I assume you'd consider them sort of the younger prospects coming on to the tour now, in their 20s, who are on YouTube with hundreds of thousands of subscribers, doing all sorts of bowling. I mean, we had Darren Tang on a few weeks ago, and he was talking about how golf has done it so well, where they've gotten these pro players who are managing to incorporate different sports into their sport and getting people like, say, a football player or an F1 driver to come on and play their sport to increase the audience. And they're doing things to entertain. And I think they've understood that the market isn't, we don't want bowlers to watch this. We want people to watch it and want to bowl.
Right.
I mean, how important do you think people like them are especially in the younger ones that haven't even touched the professional tour yet, in creating content, getting out there and trying to encourage people to watch the sport and see what it has to offer? Yeah,
I mean, that some of the things that you see, if you go look at the data, some of the breakthrough viral videos and stuff have been some of the stuff done like Belmo's with the NASCAR driver, where he threw the ball. The guy was driving the NASCAR around the track, and he threw the ball out the side and struck. And the trick shot people that do all kinds of sports, I can't remember their name. Yeah, and he has done all that with the bowling balls around the tracks and of like a skateboard thing and all that. Those videos reach way beyond the bowling audience, and you have to hope they have a little impact. And maybe someone sees that and says, Jason Belmonte, let me check him out. Oh, wow, he's on Fox. Maybe I'll watch. And, that's the pebble of the sand kernel or whatever that you hope starts going downhill and turning into a boulder at some point. I don't know how that could ever happen. You just have to hope that somebody breaks through. Maybe it will take a great female athlete who is very charismatic and gorgeous and athletic and, takes the whole PWBA by storm. A Simone Biles or something like that. Katie Ledecky. That's what the Olympics could do for us, is create stars that would cause people to want to watch the PBA and the PWBA. That's why it almost would be worth it. There was a time in the 80s, 90s, various times where a certain amount of money paid to the IOC would have gotten bowling a spot as a sport, a medal sport, or so it's been told. And it was like, it's been told it's like $10 million, and no one paid that. Now, in retrospect, would $10 million spent on that, if it would have got us in and maybe we could have started something and stayed in, would that have been $10 million better spent than $10 million spent in many other ways marketing bowling through the years? I think so. I'm not saying that kind of extortion or whatever you want to call it is a good thing, but that's how things were then. And as it's been explained to me by Dornberger and others, the trick about the Olympics also is governments run sports in most of the countries of the world. They're not a private entity. And if bowling all of a sudden was a medal sport, these governments would say, okay, we got to put some money in bowling. We're going to help build bowling centers. We're going to hire coaches. We're going to buy some bowling balls. We're going to, especially because they see bowling, you can just get one bowler, train them, and win a gold medal. Try getting a soccer team that can beat Germany, Argentina, the US, whatever, China, little countries in Africa and Asia and whatever. They're not going to win gold medals in the big, huge sports like that. They could get a bowler and win. We've had bowlers from smaller countries. Belmo's from Australia. That's not a giant country, and he's the best in the world. And we've got Finland and Sweden. They're not winning in basketball and soccer, but they've got some of the best bowlers in the world. So it's an attractive sport for those governments to invest in if what their goal is the notoriety of a gold medal or bronze or silver. So it could start a little boomlet in countries across the globe. And guess where they would go to spend their money? The United States, where they would spend it with your Brunswicks, your AMFs and all that, and Storm and Motive and that, because they're going to get pin setters, strings now probably, but pin setters, bowling balls, all the various equipment, and all that money is going to flow into the companies that are mostly United States or Europe. And then what do those companies do when they prosper? They can invest more in the PBA. So you have a whole, hopefully, build up together, and it starts a rising spiral that maybe makes the PBA bigger. And the more you have these other little countries succeeding in a sport like that, the more interest you have globally, theoretically, in bowling. And that could only help, because the one thing we know as bowling is that you don't have to be 6'8". You don't have to have muscles like an NFL lineman or an NBA like LeBron James. Some of the smallest, Pete Weber, EJ Tackett, Marshall Holman, skinny, small, have been some of the greatest in our sport. So there's no physical necessity other than being athletic and having good hand-eye coordination to succeed at bowling. Pardon me. So there's all these other countries. There's so many countries. Every country could be a gold medalist in bowling theoretically. Yeah,
it's a really interesting perspective. It's the one that we've never really discussed before. That the whole thing is about marketing, and it's about, as you said, getting young people interested in it, and it's not. Yeah, there's physical limitations in bowling centers and things like that, but the way you put it, it does put a different angle on it. But I mean, what what could possibly be done to try and make it more attractive to a young audience? I mean, we've had discussions about youth bowling here in the UK. During COVID, there was a lot of people dropped out and didn't come back again, and it's taken some time to gain the momentum. And the numbers are starting to get back up again in the youth bowling in the tournaments in the UK. But there was a lot of bowlers just disappeared overnight with COVID, and it. I don't know. I mean, when I was like a kid, bowling was you did bowling. You went bowling with your parents, and it was something special. And as you say, lots of people did it, but the internet's come along, and it's a bit of a double-edged sword. The internet, because it's been a distraction, because people are doing different things. There's a lot more things for them to do now because of the technology. But on the other hand, it's also been a benefit to bowling, because you have all this extra media. You have YouTube, and you have Bowl TV and all that sort of thing. Social media. It's all there for anybody to use, just like we're doing right now. It's all there for anybody to use to promote bowling and to showcase what they're doing in their own bowling journey. But in some ways, it's also affected bowling adversely, because people have moved away from bowling because there's other things to do.
Yeah, it's there's so many, if there were easy answers, then we'd have them already and be moving forward. The PBA has tried, under Tom Clark, who's got such an innovative mind, they have tried almost anything and everything in formats, presentation, marketing, to try and find something that breaks through. And a couple things that work great. The World Series was a fabulous World Series of bowling. That is ungodly successful for something that a lot of people hated when it came. Oh, you got all these tape TV shows happening at the same. That's not going to work. That's terrible. You have live shows. Can't be at the same place. All it turned out to be one of the greatest things, maybe the greatest thing that has come from the PBA in the last 20 years. And Bayside Bowl, Portland, Maine. Man, if you could bottle that and put that enthusiasm for bowling everywhere, we would be in the Olympics. Because that core of, I've been there. I was there the second year, and it's still one of the magnificent experiences of my life as a journalist, covering bowling, to be there among those people and experience that and see how genuine and real it is, and just think, how did these people get to be like this? And there's nothing like this anywhere else, hardly. And I don't have an answer. I don't know. It's just a unique place, and I wish we could. I mean, there's other places that are great and enthusiastic about bowling, but they're just not. It's just different there. It's hard to explain unless you experience it. Their leagues don't have any prize money, and they are so into it, and it's all about just their pride and their fun, and it's a way of seeing bowling that none of the rest of the world sees it. When you bowl league, it's always, I don't know how England is. For us, every league I've ever bowled in, it's scratch leagues, and that's prize money.
I mean, for us, your bowl a year season, pay £15 a week, you might get 100 quid at the end of it.
Yeah, that's kind of, yeah. And these guys at Bayside, they have more fun in their league than any of us, and have more fun watching the PBA than most of us do. And they don't play for any prize money in there. It's just a fascinating, it's odd place. It's an odd in a totally complimentary, positive way. It's just not like anywhere else. And I'm one who, in the old days, the place on the PBA tour was Milwaukee. You'd go in there at Red Carpet Celebrity at 9 a.m. for the first squad in the morning, and there would be 1,000 to 1,500 people filling that place. Couldn't hardly move in it, and they were all drinking already, and they were loud at 9 a.m. in the morning for us. It was an awesome place. I covered the tour there for several years for the newspaper here in Madison that I worked for, and then I got to bowl it when I was on tour, and it God, was that fun. And I've got a t-shirt that says Bayside, I think it says Bayside Bowl, Portland, Maine, like Milwaukee in the 1980s. That's what the t-shirt says. And it's still, Bayside's different than how Milwaukee was then, but it was awful beer-fueled fun. But I mean, they drink away in Bayside. But that's just an amazing place. And man, if we could find that and put it all across the bowling world, that would change things. But I have no idea how to do that.
Yeah, Jeff. When we do these podcasts, we have a list of questions here, which I haven't asked any of them, so I'm going to get rid of them right now.
Probably we're gonna. I'm not worth talking about anymore. I'm a has-been that can't hardly bowl and everything. So if you want to ask a few about me, I'll go past. I'll be here. Whatever.
Well, that took me half an hour to do that, Dave.
I'm gonna move on because I know we've been like 55 minutes yet, and there's so many things I want to ask you. We could probably do 2 or 3 hours here.
Come back again if you want. I'll come back again if you want to.
Yeah, that'll be a good idea. But I want to use the last 5 minutes for you to tell us about your 11 frame website.
Well, my career, I got my first, wrote my first story, bowling. It was a bowling story. I was hired as a bowling columnist by the Capital Times in Madison in 1980 when I was a freshman at the University of Wisconsin. The great University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I was sort of on a career or a track, academic track. I was aiming for law school is what I was thinking I was going to do. And the writing bug bit me right away. And I had switched over by the next school year, my sophomore year at UW, to the journalism school. And that set me on my path. But December 7th, 1980 was my first published story. And after I got back from the tour, I was hired by the Capital Times full-time as a crime and courts reporter. A little general assignment first, but into crime and courts. And I went to Newside instead of sports because I wanted to be able to bowl on the weekend. So that's why my goal, if bowling had not worked out after my surgery, my goal would have been to be covering the Badgers or the Packers here in Wisconsin, for sure. That's what I would have wanted to do. But it all worked out for me. So I've covered everything from county government to business. And then when the Capital Times ceased being a daily paper in 2008, I switched over to the digital side as we were moving into the online world and became one of our digital guys. And I've been in that world ever since for now I'm with the Wisconsin State Journal, which is the morning paper. That's the joint paper with the Capital Times, was the afternoon one, which isn't a daily anymore. It's just a weekly. But I work for the State Journal, and I'm a digital. I kind of run our websites, Madison.com and statejournal.com. And I was on the Lee Enterprises digital team for a while before I transitioned more into the State Journal realm. As you know, everything's digital now, and they just needed my full attention at the State Journal. But Lee Enterprises has, I don't know what, we must have 70 papers now or so across the United States. We're one of the big chains and one of the better ones. And somehow I've survived, and I'm turned 62 yesterday. So I have maybe max 3 years, may get out of here earlier than that, like 2 years retiring. And in all of that, I was the bowling columnist in the 80s before I went on tour for the Cap Times. And then I restarted when we went digital. I restarted a little bowling blog when I was working digital for the Capital Times when we first started that, called 11thframe.com. And I said, I'll do it on my free time. Just I'll get us some traffic. And then, of course, I started writing, and some of the stories I wrote drew traffic for those days. They were like, my God, this is unbelievable how many people are reading these stories. I said, yep. So, and once Facebook came along, which was about that time when Facebook started being, I think I joined in October 2008, if you look at mine. And that was when I was first working on the 11th Frame. And then eventually everything else got big enough that the 11th Frame traffic was very tiny for Madison, for Capital newspapers, for the two papers. So Mike Flanagan, who you may know, Inside Bowling and Bowl TV, him and I were friends, and his tech guy, Brian Burkhart, they pitched me and said, let's take this on its own. So I went to my bosses, and they said, sure, go ahead. It's not a big deal. So we took 11thframe.com. It was 11th Frame at Madison.com, took it off of Madison.com, and it became 11thframe.com on its own website. And we turned it into a subscription site in 2015. And that's what it's been ever since. originally it was just going to be a fun blog. I was going to write about my own bowling then and cover some of the tournaments I liked and write fun feature stories. And then it became much more journalistic and serious once I went out on my own site. And, for this is not a brag because I wish this wasn't how it is, but I'm the only real professional journalist that covers bowling on a regular basis, which is so sad when you think of when I was coming up. There was John Archibald in St. Louis and Dick Evans in Miami. Every paper had pretty much every big paper had someone who covered bowling, and that's what they did. That was their beat, one of their beats. And so the coverage of the PBA back then was so serious. If you go to newspapers.com and look at clippings, everything was news and was covered like a real sport. That's what I always say, like a real sport. Well, one of my goals when I took 11thframe.com is to sort of cover bowling like a real sport, to actually treat it as something that deserves journalistic treatment, which means sometimes you cover controversies, you cover negative stuff. This week, last weekend, I wrote a story about Pete Weber at 11thframe.com and his latest tough happening at the PBA 50 World Series of Bowling. And, now he may be making some major changes in his life here again. Hopefully maybe this will be the time he gets sober for good. And there's nobody else that wrote that story, just me. And once I retire, there probably won't be anybody to write those stories. I wish there were 10 people I was competing with to get these stories. Because there's many, many stories I could do and don't get a chance to because it's basically a second full-time job and there's only so many hours in a day. And I pass up on stuff all the time and I sacrifice a lot of stuff in my personal life because I love the sport and it deserves to be treated like a real sport. And I hope I can find somebody. I got a couple people in mind to succeed me, maybe take this over. But the problem is that the only way I'm able to do this is that I'm economically, I've got plenty of money in the bank. I can retire. I could retire now if I wanted. I like what I do at the newspaper. That's where I make my money. So nobody can push me around. I have total independence on the bowling side. If someone says, I'm not going to subscribe because you wrote this, fine, I don't care. I don't need that money. I charge $199 a month or $19.99 a year, which is $166 a month. So, and I have like 1,600 subscribers. So you can do the math. I'm not getting rich off it because I got to pay humongous fees to credit card companies. I pay my tech guy. I pay taxes. I use some of the money to travel to tournaments when I can. So believe me, I'm not making my living off of that. I make the living off the Wisconsin State Journal. So that's where I'm at. And but the economics of it are why it would be very hard if I could find a good younger bowling journalist or journalist who likes bowling to maybe take it over. I don't think they could make a living off it, and they would be economically vulnerable to anybody trying to bully them or extort them or whatever based on what they're writing. And then as a reader, can you really trust that? My readers can trust me that they can disagree with what I write, but I hope they understand that the only agenda I have is my own views of what is good for the sport of bowling. I have no economic ties to anybody in bowling. I don't depend on anybody in bowling. I'm not a bowler myself anymore in a serious way. So I don't have any stake in anything. So you might not agree with what I write, but you know that's my real view and not somebody using me as a vehicle to get something across.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So we're gonna have one more question because how we got to an hour already is beyond me. Like until next Wednesday, chatting to you. But the final question I've got to ask is: if you have to nominate one person to come on the SpareTime Podcast next, who are you nominating?
Oh man, well I don't know everybody you've had on. What kind of are you mostly looking for like PBA superstars and that sort of thing?
I mean, that's the ambition, but we're open to it. We've had all sorts. We've had Tom Clark on, Parker Bone, Chris Barnes, obviously yourself. We have a mix, you know.
Well, I mean, I could name 50 people. The one person who I would find really interesting to get on, but I don't think you could, would be the Sheik, the president of the International Bowling Federation, who's embroiled in a couple of lawsuits now, at least one, maybe more than one. And I would love to hear him answer, what's going on at the IBF. I don't think that he will. He's never, a couple of emails and stuff I've sent, I always dealt with Andy Oram. And now we have a new CEO, Michael Seymour from Australia. And I'm hoping to have touched base with him. And after things get a little more stuff that he wants to do gets going later this year, I'm going to, later this summer, hopefully do a Q&A with him. Somebody I know you could get that would really, really be interesting is one of the, I would love to, the issue that here in the US, I'm curious about that I don't know enough about, and I don't know who exactly you would talk to, but it seems like there's a lot of controversy about the European Bowling Tour or European bowling, the major tournaments, that there's like every tournament is filled with purple hammers and pitch blacks.
I mean,
and what is, why we don't, I mean, the PBA changed, but even when the PBA allowed the purple hammer and the pitch black, people were still winning with resin. I keep seeing pictures on my Facebook, like a whole 3 ball returns, and the only ball there is the purple hammer and a couple. There's no one throwing anything but urethane. What in the world is going on in Europe that has made it it seemed like 100, or am I wrong? And it's not 100%, but it seems to be like a giant controversy. If you look at the Beef and Barnsey show, Stu and Dom Barrett were on yesterday, and they were talking about the Lucy. And then Dom made some reference to some European event that had just happened. And he was like, I'm not going to bowl anymore if that's how it's going to be. So you've got one of the greatest bowlers in European bowling history, and he's not even going to go bowl any European tournaments because of what seemingly is all this stuff. So I would love to hear you guys get somebody on there. Maybe it's Dom, maybe it's Stu. I don't know that much about all the people in Europe and who it would be to get on there, but I would love to hear more about top level European bowling and what the heck's going on there.
I mean, I've never bowled top level like adult Europeans, but I've bowled youth events, and I flew to Denmark in February. That is literally how it is. I mean, I went through one ball all week, and I think the reason being is, I mean, I don't know the backstory of the patterns, and I don't know if they're made for purples or what, but they're just the ball that works.
But even on the tour, when they could use them, they weren't all, I mean, there was a lot of them and a lot of pitch blacks, but there was also, a lot of reactive resin too. And it seemed like every time I read about these European ones, that's the only thing being used. And
I'm laughing at that because as I look to the right, I can see a purple hammer on the floor down here.
Yeah, I'm not blaming anybody. If it's legal, use it. I have a pitch black that I could not use on the PBA tour if I was bowling at any of those events. But I've got it, and I took it to Ron Moore's tournament the last time I bowled that 2 years ago, because as long as it's legal for me to use, I'm going to have it in my bag. I would prefer that all bowling use the PBA rule, because I think it's 100% wrong for any ball to be used that becomes illegal during use based on the way we measure legality. I'm not going to get into this. They're really not getting softer. If you punch them with the durometer, they're reading too soft. The rule says the durometer determines what the hardness is. So either replace the durometer or change the rule, but you can't have bowling balls going down the lane that are violating the rules as we define the rules. So the PBA did the right thing. USB, the whole world should follow that rule. If you want to change the rule because they're really not getting softer, a physicist may tell you, fine, change the rule. But the rule says use a durometer to measure it. And when you measure it, it's too soft when you're done bowling. Gone. PBA did the right thing. Okay, use a harder urethane, whatever. But it's just one of those things that I see this and I'm just like, I need to know more. I mean, why is it so dominant in Europe? Maybe Thomas Larson, does he bowl those from Denmark?
Yeah, to be fair,
and I like Thomas. I've talked to him many times. Sharp guy, USBC Masters champ, real honest from every experience I've had, real thoughtful and knowledgeable. Would love to, and he probably bowls a lot of these European events. Would love to get some perspective. And it doesn't have to be all about the all about the Purple Hammers. And I don't know enough about European bowling. You know, what are all the tournaments? Who bowls? You know, that sort of thing. I would love to hear more about that. Now, I would assume you have a lot of listeners over there, so maybe Thomas Larson is the guy to get, and he'd be of interest than another. I mean, obviously Belmo would be. I could name all the obvious ones: Belmo, Kyle Troop, you know, whoever's the best on tour. Another one I would suggest: Jillian Martin, best young female bowler in the world. Has already won the USBC Queens and another PWBA Tour title. In my mind, she might be the best female bowler in the world, period, right now. And when she devotes herself 100% to it, she's going to be right there with the Jordan Richards and Brianna Cote and the very best, and battling to be the best in the world for sure once she gets on at Nebraska. And she's very interesting. And you could ask her some tough questions. She didn't medal at the recent IBF World Youth Championships, so she showed her being human there. Wasn't very successful at coming off a Queens win. So and she's very thoughtful. I've interviewed her many times. Very smart, very well spoken. She'd be very interesting, I'm sure. I don't know if your audience really knows who she is, but
yeah.
Okay. I don't know how much younger U.S. bowling penetrates over there. So there's a couple ideas for you.
Mm-hmm. I think for us the rough part is that we're not like, I can't drive an hour or so and see them, you know. We struggle with the connections. I mean, sure. We've got social media, which is great, and that's how I reached out to you and how I reach out to everyone else for the most part. But, you know, especially the bigger bowlers and, you know, the bowlers that have a bigger following, they're so hard to reach because there's so many messages.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. But that's where I think a guy like Thomas, he's not quite at Belmo's level. So, and you guys have that. He's European, you're European. He would probably love to come on with you. And he's really a thoughtful, well-spoken guy who he's said a couple things in me interviewing over the years that made me look at issues a little differently. That's an interesting perspective. So I think he would probably be a great guy for you guys to have on.
Jeff, I mean, we could keep on going with this, and I have like 2,000 questions on the floor, which are not going to get asked tonight. So I think we've got to get you back on at some point in the future.
Save those questions.
Yeah.
Save the questions. I'll come back on whenever you want.
I've got them. They're all on the floor here. I'm going to pick them up and save them. But it's been really interesting. I mean, you've given some different perspectives on things that we'd never thought of before. And every time you answer a question, I got like 5 more to ask you. But yeah, we'll do this another time. But thanks for the time, Jeff Richgels from the 11 Frame website. I think you're going to put a link in the video in this video so people can link into your website. So thank you for your time, Jeff. We'll speak to you again soon. That's the end of this Spare Time podcast. I'm getting a suntan from these lights. It's getting pretty hot after about an hour. And
I've got tan lines from them already.
Yeah, no, that's just because you haven't been showered. Now in 15 minutes, I think it's some sort of record. If you like what you've been watching today, if you like and subscribe, thanks to ADR Wear. And we'll be back again soon with another Spare Time podcast. So for me, Nigel, and him,
Ben,
yeah, we'll see you next time. Bye.
See you later.